what really, really excites me about B Hodl is not simply the treasury, the accumulation of Bitcoin and the accumulation of the treasury. It's that opportunity to show what Bitcoin can do. And when you take a step back and you think, what exactly is the product here? And what's the total addressable market that we could hit with that product? And you suddenly realize that the product we're talking about here is the transmission of value globally on the internet. And when you realize that is what you're selling, suddenly you see the total addressable market is gigantic.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by B Hodl CEO Freddie New, Chief Financial Officer Dave Boylan. Freddie, Dave, very good to speak with you. Freddie, to start off, could you give us an overview of B Hodl's business model, mission, and why investors should have a look at the company?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having us on. To answer that question, it's important, I think, to consider Bitcoin as well as what the company is doing. So in a line, B Hodl is a Bitcoin treasury and services company. So what we're looking to do is to capitalize both on the store of value narrative of Bitcoin, which the price has demonstrated over the last 5 years is probably well answered, but also to move into the next stage of monetization of Bitcoin, and that's the medium of exchange. A key issue faced by a simple holder of Bitcoin is that although the compound annual growth rate of Bitcoin is significant, it's traditionally been very hard to generate cash flow from holding Bitcoin. That's the problem we wanted to solve. So in other words, we want to offer investors a company that takes advantage both of the store of value narrative with that compound annual growth rate, but also develop strategies actually to use the Bitcoin that we buy dynamically in our business to generate revenue.
Why do you believe B Hodl has a competitive edge in building a credible regulated Bitcoin business in the UK, Freddie?
Well, firstly, I'd cite the experience of our team. So we pulled together a team with a combined 40 years worth of industry experience. And that includes 3 board members who are joining us from Coin Corner, which is one of the oldest and most well-respected Bitcoin exchanges in the United Kingdom. We've also brought in people like myself. I've worked in the city as an M&A lawyer for many years, subsequently in many different startup businesses. We have as our chair the former CFO at PayPal, who comes to us with extreme experience both in the traditional financial world and also in alternative pay technology. And we're joined also by Alan Farrington with a background of Bailey Gifford in wealth management and in asset management. So we believe we've got a great team, and the key person who I mentioned last for a very particular reason is probably Zach Lakin. He and our Chief Bitcoin Officer join us with incredible experience in that deployment of Bitcoin that I mentioned earlier. How do you earn revenue from Bitcoin? We believe the team there have developed ways that will enable them by, for example, liquidity provision in Bitcoin's payment layer to generate funds through our operational work.
Dave, one of your stated principles is transparency. How important do you believe transparency is for building trust with investors who may be new to Bitcoin?
I think it's extremely important to be as transparent as possible with the technology we're using. Bitcoin is still scary to people. It's still a new technology. I'm fortunate enough to have worked in it for 10 years, so I know what building trust and transparency means and how important that is to people using Bitcoin. So we're basically staking our reputations and our service behind Bitcoin in terms of building up that trust. And we have many plans to be as transparent as possible with our reporting, with the data we're going to send out to individuals on our website to actually make it much more accessible and less daunting.
Freddie, the main technical, regulatory, or competitive risks you confront, and what would be HODL's unique strengths or moats that mitigate those?
Well, firstly to say that in terms of regulatory activity and compliance, we have a very high degree of compliance because we're now a listed company, obviously, and so we are subject to all of the ordinary listing rules, the DTRs, etc. We are listed on the Aquis Exchange, and so we also have to comply with the rules of the exchange in the ordinary course. And the interesting nuance, however, is that while we are fully compliant as a listed business, our operational activities are not regulated. So the provision, the use of Bitcoin in Lightning nodes in the way that we are planning to do operationally is actually not a regulated activity. So we're fortunate in that regard, I suppose. Maybe that's less of a moat. I think it's worth mentioning that probably there is a degree of overlap in competition between ourselves and other Bitcoin treasury companies, but that degree of overlap is not perfect. So yes, we're competing for Bitcoin, but our business is actually extremely different from, I think, any other treasury business in the UK, if not worldwide. Our specific plan relates effectively to the provision of Bitcoin liquidity in Lightning nodes and all of the different potential means of earning revenue that we've identified and which we'll explore during our first year of operations.
Dave, over the next 12 to 24 months, what are your key growth milestones and operational targets? How will you validate that your business model is working and advancing?
Good question. There's quite a few key KPIs that you've probably already seen in traditional treasury companies. The Bitcoin yield, the Bitcoin per share are all very important. The MNAV has become, and the NAV has become a real star of the show in terms of treasury companies. As well as all those and aggressively accumulating Bitcoin, B Hodl has a great opportunity to actually show off what Bitcoin is about, how transparent it can be, what the mempool means, and the pure visibility you can get from Bitcoin. It's really an opportunity to shine a light on the amount of data that we can produce and the different KPIs that you can produce when you're actually utilizing Bitcoin, making it work, showing off the Lightning Network, and actually producing revenue on Bitcoin. So there's, as well as the traditional Treasury Co KPIs, we'll also have a plethora of more interesting ones that will actually raise some questions, raise some eyebrows, and actually what Bitcoin can do.
Freddie, maybe just to finish, why should investors be excited about B Hodl's investment case? What unique value or upside do you believe you offer compared to alternatives in the Bitcoin or crypto infrastructure space?
I'll actually pick up a comment that Dave just made there, show what Bitcoin can do. What really, really excites me about B Hodl is not simply the treasury, the accumulation of Bitcoin and the accumulation of the treasury. It's that opportunity to show what Bitcoin can do. And when you take a step back and you think, what exactly is the product here? And what's the total addressable market that we could hit with that product? And you suddenly realize that the product we're talking about here is the transmission of value globally on the internet. And when you realize that is what you're selling, suddenly you see the total addressable market is gigantic. It's denominated in the trillions or the quadrillions. And to grab even a small part of that market by something as simple as investing in a company that's looking to build out that infrastructure is, I think, well, obviously do your own research, and this is not financial advice. But
Well, gents, congratulations on your IPO on Aquis. I hope you'll keep us updated on your progress.
Thank you so much for having us. Great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
That's B Hodl CEO Freddie New and Chief Financial Officer Dave Boylan.